for Cultural Heritage does not know better. Okay, she doesn't know that the transformation of the Hagia Sophia into a mosque is seen by Orthodox Christians as the ultimate, the worst insult they could suffer. And even today, you might have heard that yesterday, for the first time in some 84 something years, for the first time with the beginning of Ramadan, some Muslim prayers were read within the Hagia Sophia and broadcast on Turkish television, and they would be doing it every night during the Ramadan period. So there is a big uproar by Orthodox Christians who see that as a deconsecration and as a defilement of the church. But after that debate of that NGO, the mayor has seen that, and he has made statements when asked about the future of the church later, in which he acknowledges that, you know, there are rules about that church. He stopped talking about demolition. In my statement there, I had said that if you keep asking me what to do, again, on a personal level, I would express the hope that at some point the two governments, the government of Kosovo and the government of Serbia, would get together and pay jointly for the completion of that church. And that, to my mind, the way I see things, would have to come when the reconciliation or conciliation, let's say, talks come to an end, to a conclusion, and the two, Kosovo and Serbia, are about to join the European Union. I did not mention it there, but it is something that, I don't know if you know, the government has expressed, the Kosovo government has expressed in the past its willingness to pay for the completion of the church. But that was just talk, and I had conveyed that to Father Sava and Bishop Theodosi, etc. They saw it with interest, but you know, it was just some thoughts that were expressed. Who knows? Maybe the time might come that that will happen. In the meantime, the conclusion from that discussion, as published in the media by somebody who had undertaken to write a report on that, was that his recommendation was, and he felt that that would be agreed by the people who were in the discussion, that nothing should happen to the church. The church should remain as is, as a monument to the unfinished project of Serbia in Kosovo. But it should not be touched, and all around it, it should be very nicely landscaped to show the contrast. My reaction to that is that so long as nothing happens to the church, you can give your own narrative, and the other side will give its own narrative. The Kosovo-Albanian narrative now is that it is a Milosevic church. The Serbian narrative is that Milosevic was an atheist, and therefore you cannot talk about him being like behind the church. These are narratives. So long as the narratives do not lead the two sides into an open conflict, physical conflict, it's fine with me. Sorry for the long answer.
No, it's been useful. We've heard some facts here. So this again is a question to both of you. Mr. De Grande, if you can start by answering. After 16 years of litigation, so this is something that we discussed, the monastery Deceni finally proved their inalienable right to their property. Why did this monastery need 16 years to prove that they do have the right to own property, and how come that somebody tried to nationalize their property in the 21st century? what is it that happened in Kosovo government that they thought that this was a good idea that would stand?
Well, anybody who's been following this case knows how extremely complex it's been. You know, over the 16 years, you've seen the changes between which courts have had to deal with it, which governments were in place, which leadership, which administrative bodies, which SOE, which socially owned enterprises, municipality. I can't think of a more complex situation for a land dispute case between two neighbors. On top of it, there's a simple fact that anytime two neighbors are going to come together and have a dispute, especially a legal dispute over a piece of land, it will get contentious, and it will get very personal and very passionate very quickly. But now, adding all the layers on top of that, of the local context, and then the layers of the complexity of it, the administrative complexity, the legal complexity that we just talked about, as they were trying to figure out these new laws, it was just a recipe for a terrible situation. It took too long. 16 years is far too long for any legal case to happen, especially one that could affect the daily lives of the monks living in Dejani Monastery. In the end, thankfully, the institutions had built up, as I said before, and I know I'm generally an optimist, but the institutions had built up to a point where rule of law did prevail in the end, and the Constitutional Court did recognize that their right to a fair trial had been violated. Hopefully, that's the end that we'll see now, and now becomes a matter of implementation. And as I said before, K4 has been coordinating extremely well with the Kosovo police. Things have remained peaceful. It's in no one's interest for it to escalate above that. And now it's time for these two sides to close that terrible chapter and recognize that Dejani Monastery is a huge benefit, not just for the Serbian Orthodox Church, not just for the Kosovo Serb people, not just for the Serbian people in general, but for that whole region. I mean, every time I've been there, I've been there probably about 6 times in the past year. Every time I've been there, it's full of internationals. And I know that Father Saba also has invited groups of Albanians to come there, and coming back to the theme of cultural heritage. The best way to build these bridges is to bring people into your cultural heritage sites. Show them not just what you're thinking, don't just explain to them your culture, but let them walk through it, let them live it, let them hear it. And that becomes much more real embodiment of what it is that you're getting at, what it is, or who you are. This has been, Visoki Dejani Monastery as a UNESCO World Heritage Site means that this is a benefit for all people. All people should be able to visit it in a secure environment. They should be able to learn from going there. They should be able to benefit from going there. And I can only see positive things both for the municipality and for the monastery if they can build a better relationship and really try to develop the monastery.
Yes, thank you. Now, saying that it took 16 years for the monastery to prove that it is the legal owner of the land that was disputed might be a bit misleading, as it happens in cases involving land ownership. We were not dealing for 16 years with a give and take, like a daily confrontation or even a yearly exchange. It was at the end of 2012 that the special chamber of the Supreme Court accepted an agreement that was good for the monastery, and then the municipality and some socially owned enterprises who had not been party to the dispute appealed, and it took about 4 years or like 3 years for the appeals to be seen again, to be decided upon by the Supreme Court, and then another more year for the Constitutional Court to decide. Now, all this time, the land has not changed at all. The monks at the Dejani Monastery have been cultivating the land. They have been using the land, and the media misrepresented the situation, Kosovo media, when they wrote that the Constitutional Court decided to donate land to the monastery. That's nonsense. The land had been with the monastery all these years. The effort was on the other side to take away those lands from the monastery, and they failed. In the meantime, the lands remained with the monastery, and the only thing that was different was, in addition to the litigation, it's also that in 2000, in the year 2000, the municipality had changed arbitrarily and illegally the cadastral record that indicated the monastery as the legal owner of those lands. And so now it is under the obligation to change again the cadastral records. And when those people in the municipality and in the so-called association of historians or association of intellectuals of legend, etc., when they say they're not going to implement it, to implement the decision, what does it mean? They're going to prevent the change in the cadastral record, the restitution of legal ownership in the cadastral records. Sooner or later, they will have to do it. I mean, they are not physically preventing implementation because there is no such thing. I mean, those socially owned enterprises that claimed ownership are defunct. They do not exist. They have not been operating there for years before the land was given to the, returned to the monastery in the 90s. So what I wanted to say is that the media have really misrepresented when they said that the court decided to donate. It's not a donation. They had it, and the court prevented those who had designs against the monastery and designs on those lands.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. De Grande, the U.S. Embassy in Pristina hosted actually the Serbian church officials, including the abbot of Lečni Monastery. So does your support to their cause extend to something more than just public events, meetings, or do you help them financially or through, I don't know, political pressure for some things to be resolved?
Well, first of all, I'd be careful with talking about supporting anyone's cause necessarily. We support the right of the Serbian Orthodox Church to exist and function and flourish in a multi-ethnic Kosovo, just as we support the right of the Islamic community, the Lutherans, the Protestants, the Catholics, and so on. That said, we have an excellent relationship with the Serbian Orthodox Church, and it's not just in our public events, not just in our public meetings and photo ops and things like this. We engage with the leadership and the members of the Serbian Orthodox Church very rarely. Very frequently. Opposite, yeah, very frequently. Like I said before, I've been to Dečani Monastery probably 6 times in the last year. I've been to half a dozen monasteries throughout the country. We've done our cultural preservation projects in a number of places. Velika Hoća alone, I believe we renovated 4 churches there. The ambassador, he meets and consults with Bishop Theodosia. I personally go and I meet with a lot of the monks, the leadership, Father Sava, of course, and some of the others, both in Pristina as well as at their monasteries. And then of course we also support them economically by buying Dečani wine and commissioning an icon at Sokolica Monastery a few weeks ago. So we do what we can to continue to promote their cultural heritage in the country, continue to show that they're an integral part of Kosovo today as well as Kosovo's history and Kosovo's future as well.
Thank you so much. Before I ask my final question, I will see if somebody from the audience has something to ask.
Okay. Okay, so do you, the both of you, feel that enough is being done if we know, all of us at least here present today, that it weren't for K4 soldiers protecting all these cultural monuments, that they would probably perish in the next 10 to 15 days, like it happened in 2004? So do you feel that enough is being done?
Yes, in fact, yes, I got your question, and I was going to say that there was this question there, and I was waiting to hear it together with number 4. Who is responsible for protecting it, the cultural heritage, and are they doing enough in this regard? So may I then answer the whole question, who is responsible? There are 2 meanings to the word responsible. One is who is ultimately responsible for the protection of everything here, and therefore the protection of somebody's property. And the other is who has the final word as to what will be done in order to protect this or that monument. Who has the final word how this church will be renovated, how this building will be reconstructed, and things like that. So, nothing could happen on any monument belonging to the Serbian Orthodox Church without the churches having first, middle, and final word. And that is, in all my work as advisor on religious and cultural heritage or facilitator for the EU before, this is a big principle. Nothing can happen without the full consent of the church on every detail. Now, who's ultimately responsible? The government of Kosovo. So long as there is a need for the international community, mainly through K4, to add to the protection, the international community has been willing to do exactly that, and it has been doing it properly and effectively. Now, is enough being done? Life never stops. We have to be careful, we have to be vigilant, and we have to try every day to make sure that those invaluable treasures that Kosovo is blessed with are there. They are used by their legal and spiritual owners, and they are enjoyed by the whole population of Kosovo and the international community. That's my answer.
I don't have too much to add to that, except to say, as you had said, there's always more that can be done. I painted a somewhat optimistic view of what rule of law is in Kosovo, not to say that Kosovo has gotten there, but to say that Kosovo, it's important and it's okay to recognize that the government of Kosovo and its institutions have grown over the last decade, 2 decades. They're not there yet. It's not perfect. That's why we have K4 here. That's why we continue to have ULEX here, but K4 in particular, and that's why we have K4 right here. But
they are just macchiato tea.
It's not just for the macchiatos, it's also for the cultural heritage sites.
Sorry guys.
The U.S. Embassy, we support the continued strong presence of K4 for the years to come, because K4, although it hasn't had to have had a kinetic posture in Kosovo for years, the fact is just having them be here creates an environment of increased security, an environment of increased calm that's very important. It gives Kosovo structures the space to grow further without feeling under pressure from some people who would spoil it.
But do you ever feel they will be redundant in their role?
I hope so. I hope K4 will become redundant, will become unnecessary in the future. That's the goal. The whole point of having a military presence in a foreign country is not to stay there forever. And, thankfully, that's a lesson we're learning, or have learned. But it's to do, it's to work yourself out of a job, really. I mean, ultimately, the U.S. Embassy, hopefully in the future, will be downsized as well. Hey, we're building this massive embassy in Pristina, as you all know. I want to work myself out of a job. We need, we want to have a smaller presence because we want to be able to rely on the people to be responsible for their own country. And we've been building the capacity of those people to do that over the years. And again, they're not there, but I think it's okay to recognize that there's been a huge improvement. 2016 in Kosovo is not the same as 2004, thankfully. It was a horrible, horrible tragedy what happened in 2004, and I like to think it won't happen now, but I'm pretty certain it won't happen in years to come because of the trajectory that we're on right now.
Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I will talk in Serbian, but Milica will translate my question. I have two questions for both. Prvo pitanje je zašto se pitanje crkve Svetog Spasa prebacuje i stalno se ponavlja političko umjesto da to bude pravno i pitanje kulturne baštine. A drugo je kakav je komentar Europske unije i Amerike na iskazivanje takozvanih historičara Kosova da su Dečani kulturna baština Kosova, to je da su se gradili Albanci i njihova pleme Gaši.
So the first question is why does the question of the Church of Christ the Savior keeps becoming a political issue instead of being a legal issue, which it in its essence is, and how does the U.S. Embassy comment on the fact that there are some Albanian historians who claim that Dečani Monastery is actually Albanian heritage and that Albanian tribe of Gashi actually built this monastery. So how does the U.S. Embassy comment on this? If you comment at all.
Well, taking the second question first, I've heard these claims by this group of historians that Mr. Moskopoulos has referenced earlier, the Ali Hadri group in the West, and some other people as well. It hasn't just been them claiming that Visoki Dečani Monastery had once been an Albanian structure, and I have not seen anything to support that claim. I think it's frankly pretty ridiculous that they would say that. All the documentary evidence, all of the historical evidence, everything I've seen, read, everything points to the fact that this was a church built by the Serbs and has continued to be for the Serbs, for the Serbian Orthodox Church throughout its history. So that claim, it makes no sense to me. I think it's tragic that people will take, it actually goes back to why cultural heritage itself is so important. Because if you have the facts on the ground, if people go into a place, if they see a 500-year-old carving on the wall written in Cyrillic explaining the origin of Dečani Monastery, and clearly that plaque, that carving has been there for 500 years, it takes quite some mental gymnastics, if you will, to say that somehow that was distorted or manipulated or something like that. Cultural heritage, tangible cultural heritage, puts the truth right in front of you, puts the facts right on the ground that you can see and touch and smell and feel. So, not being a historian, but that claim makes no sense to me. That what the historians are saying makes no sense to me. On the other one about how Christ the Savior Church has become politicized, it's highly unfortunate. It was built in a very political era, very politically contentious era, and in general, it's very easy for legal cases to become politicized, especially when you talk about clashes of ethnicity, clashes of culture, and so unfortunately, it has become a political issue as well as a legal issue. And what that means is, once the legal case is resolved, we still do have to deal with the political issue. Now, that's the nice thing, from our perspective, is once it once the legal setting is complete and it gets back into just a political and cultural issue, then that's where it's more open for other groups to participate in that conversation. And that's where we can play a larger role in trying to bring the parties together, trying to come up with a rational solution, acting as honest brokers, offering our good offices. I agree with what Mr. Moskopoulos had said earlier, though, about this particular church being a consecrated building, and it makes no sense to turn into many of the other things. So I don't know if it's a little bit roundabout way of answering your question, but I hope I got to what you were asking.
Thank you. I will answer the question about the identity of the monuments and of the efforts to dispute the identity, to claim that those churches and monasteries were originally Albanian and then they were usurped, so to say, or not so to say, this is what they say, by the Serbs. It's one of the most insidious and dangerous attacks against the Serbian cultural heritage here. And it has no foundation whatsoever in